Hello and welcome to this week's review of My Hero Academia Vigilantes. This week I'm reviewing the episode Public and Private. We're going to kick off this review, as we always do with these reviews, by talking about the positives and the headline positives, all the things I enjoyed about this particular episode. I have to say that this is a very surreal, strange little episode. I like the interactions between All Might and Namosa, and I think that it really does give us an insight into a sadder reality for certain quirk users in this world. This is a very strange episode, particularly in the early half of it. The opening action sequence that we get is just so odd and surreal that I was honestly expecting it to be revealed to be a dream sequence, with Crawler being revealed to be the big epic superhero that's saving us from all these strange threats. Like, first of all, it begins off with something that you'd expect from this world, this giant statue that's come to life, either because it's literally a statue that's come to life, or someone that has a quirk that makes them look like a statue, or what have you. And then the next villain that he introduces is a sentient block of tofu, and the one after that is that giant corn cob thing. It ends up feeling like we're looking at something from some kind of B horror comedy from the 1980s. Like, seriously, I was expecting we're going to start getting Attack of the Killer Tomatoes kicking off at any moment. It was just this strange series of events that I was just really not expecting, but hey ho, it turns out this isn't a dream sequence at all, and the person saving the day here is All Might, which is something that I was really surprised by. It seems to be that all of All Might's fights in this spin-off season have this really odd edge to them. The last time that we saw him in this series was fighting against a guy who could control cows. Now he's fighting against the rest of the fresh food section at the local supermarket. This series has a very odd supermarket feel to it. It really does. But anyway, all that stuff, as strange, as weird, as oddly just surreally fun as it is, it's over almost as soon as it starts. I would have liked it to go on a little bit longer. I would have liked to see a little bit more of an action sequence take place there, but I understand why it wasn't, because A, that isn't really the thrust of this episode. As much as I would love to see All Might fighting against vegetables in downtown Tokyo, I think this just works as a cute little aside, because the truth of the matter is that this isn't the thrust of the episode. This is an episode which is about developing the police investigation into trying to figure out exactly who Crawler and Popstep really are, and their connection to everything that happened at the convention in the previous volume. Even though one could argue that, well, they could end up arguing that it was all done in self-defense, but that's a discussion for a whole other time. It is still interesting, surreal as it is, to see All Might back when he was still a full-time hero. Sure, it wasn't him in his prime, but it was still at a point in his life where he could still be the hero that everyone knew and everyone loved, even if his failing health was a great limitation on why we could end up saving the day. And it does end up itself acting for a great counterpoint with Crawler and his dreams and his ambitions. Crawler wants to be the hero. He wants to save the day in whichever way that he can do, whether that is doing this local friendly neighborhood superhero thing that he's doing, or something of a grander scale. He wants to be the hero, but as has been hinted in the previous episode, he also wants all the social benefits that come with that. Maybe not to the point of getting merchandising deals and trademarks and sidekicks and all the celebrity life that goes with that, but certainly at the very least being part of a larger unit that means he's not getting walloped by people that have just come tumbling out the pub. For All Might, he's living the very real reality of being a hero in this world. That being that he has no social life, he's not able to get close to anybody as it would end up putting their lives at risk, and he is currently living with a life-changing injury. Sorry, it's late at night that I'm recording this. A life-changing injury that he has to keep private. He is very much going through the harsh realities of being a hero, something that I do have to really give credit to this series to actually going into. It tackles the, want of a better phrase, the darker side of the realities of being a superhero and there being a superhero world without it getting into the more conventional darkness that we see within a lot of superhero fiction. I will be honest with you, if I see another series which ultimately boils down to what if Superman but bad, I'm going to lose my fucking mind, but that's a rant and discussion for a whole other time. For Crawler, he only sees All Might as being the symbol of peace. He doesn't see the man behind that symbol. And of course that is due in no small part to just how private All Might needs to be, and given how ultimately Crawler sees Hero Society as a whole. As has been proven over the course of this series, he seems to have a rather romanticised version of it, arguably to a greater extent than which Midoriya really does. I remember a few volumes ago where he was revealed that he had inadvertently saved a younger version of Popstep and was just imagining that person that he saved growing up to be a big name hero and just making some off comment about, oh yeah, I was saved when I was younger and that inspired me, and that ultimately being Crawler's just great reward for all of this. He has this greater vision of what Hero Society is, not necessarily what it should be, but again, that's a discussion for a whole other time. This is the week, nonetheless, where it does feel as though we're pivoting into something more substantial. Something that I really wasn't expecting when we got into the whole strange matter of All Might's slightest nightmare on the bread aisle. Like, seriously. Whatever, I'm getting too hung up on all of that. This week it does start to pivot into something a lot more substantial, and we're starting to get into more of Nomasa, and I'm probably mispronouncing that name, the detective guy that was seen on and off over the past few volumes and well as within the main series, and about his investigations into the Vigilante characters. It is interesting to see this other side of the hero world we haven't seen thus far, and right now we're getting into more of the busy work of him trying to uncover Crawler and Popstep as being vigilantes. He has his theories, but he doesn't really have anything provable. He doesn't really have much on probable cause. That is something that may well be dealt with at a later date. I'm soon we'll end up getting to that. That feels like it will be the main thrust of this particular volume, if not something that we'll see on and off as a semi-active presence throughout the next few volumes, if not the remainder of the run of this series. What I will say is I do like seeing this partnership between All Might and the detective starting to take form. We know they're already buddies within the main series, but now it's our time to actually see how that connection builds between the two of them. And one of the things that does actually make this kind of like a sweet little arrangement is the fact that he actually gives All Might a means of being able to just socialise. That little exchange that we get with him just sitting down looking really just nervous and kind of twitchy almost reminds me of some of the stuff that we see of Midoriya within the main series. It shows a very identifiable, slightly socially awkward side of this character. Of course, it does also allow him to be able to share information that he doesn't otherwise get a chance to do so. All Might in this world can't be really much of a detective in the way that other heroes can be, because of the fact that he can't use his power for too long without revealing the true nature of just how limited he really is. So it is good that, certainly from a universe point of view, this is showing how he was able to get the more detective work side of hero work done, even if it means that he's effectively jobbing around a police detective in order to get that. Now, Masa was always a character that I felt should have been given more airtime and screen time within the main series. Maybe not to a radical extent, but it always felt strange to me that he was a character that was introduced rather early on in such a means in which it felt like he was going to become a recurring character. Maybe not quite a Jim Gordon-esque character, but at least someone we'd see now and again to give us a sense of grounding with this universe. He wouldn't be a character with superpowers, and if he did have one, it would be rather mediocre, and it was ultimately just seeing the world from a different perspective, something that I think the main series has quite well when it comes to the distinction between heroes and villains, but not much as far as, say, law enforcement or the rescue people that you would end up getting at fire and rescue healthcare, which are also part of this whole industry here. But of course, part of the reason why I also wish that character got a little bit more airtime is purely and simply because I'm one of the 12 people that liked Gotham. So seeing normal cops trying to figure out superhero stuff is something that I always enjoy. I am interested though, with that in mind, to see how they'll handle this element going forward. Granted, it's not going to be a massive part of it, and it feels as though this involvement of this character is going to be almost exclusively connected to trying to rumble Crawler and Popstep, but we'll see how all that goes. I will admit that All Might's involvement at this point in the series feels like an odd development. Previously, we'd seen him in what was essentially an OVA-esque episode with us just seeing how he was at this particular point in the timeline, which was a great insight and something that I did enjoy, but bringing him in now just feels a little bit strange to me. Now, I will admit that I think I will be more okay with it if it turns out he's just a side character. Someone that appears in this every now and again, maybe when it makes sense for him to be involved. Like, oh, there's one of the villains is getting a little bit too much for Popstep and Crawler to handle, so All Might comes in and our heroes do a runner because they don't want to be arrested. Like, something like that I can understand, but it feels as though he's going to start taking up a larger section of the screen time of this volume, if not beyond, from this point out. And it does make sense in the context of this episode's title as to why he's here. He, Nomasa, Popstep, they all have to balance their public and private lives. All Might is still very much an active hero at this point in the timeline, but I do feel that his involvement from here on out will just take more screen time away from Crawler. This is supposed to be his life story. This is his story. This is his life. This is about him being a vigilante and whatever may come thereafter. And to an extent about Popstep's life as well, as she's the secondary protagonist with all of this. And whenever they bring a big name from the main series into all of this, it always makes you feel nervous, as certainly as has been the case in prior volumes, it does feel as though they're stealing potentially rather interesting character development moments from them. Case in point when we had Eraserhead dealing with the mutated teenager who was trying to attack the gig that Popstep was at. Like, I expected that the big thrust of that would be Popstep would get the win and that she'd ultimately have to make something of a decision between being a wannabe pop star and being a wannabe vigilante, and it'd be a chance for her to develop as a character. But ultimately we didn't get that, so that Eraserhead could have his moment to effectively steal her thunder from my point of view. And there's a part of me that feels that we might get something similar as this particular volume goes along, and I'm really nervous that we might get a scene where All Might reveals the fact that he is as frail as he is to Crawler or Popstep. Something that I'm not comfortable with, because it then takes away the significance of All Might revealing his difficulties to Midoriya in the main series, but that's something that we'll definitely see as we go forward. I will have to say that the scene that we see with the detective and All Might meeting is enjoyable enough. It's great to see this contrast between the confident hero that we know as All Might and this nervous, frail version of him. It's only a matter of pages between these two versions of it, and like I say, there's something of Midoriya about him when we see him just trying to interact and just have a little bit of a social life, even if it's just these short meetings in the local cafe. We do see something similar kind of with him in the main series, but this is a different case. This is with him still trying to make that balance between the private and the public in a way in which he never really had to in the main series, at least not for long, but that's going over stuff we already know about. A large proportion of this episode is focused around Nomasa, and with him being a central character of this episode, with of course the key scene with all of this being with him trying to convince his sister to give up Popstep for interviewing. Now, I understand why she isn't giving her up, beyond just the simple fact that a matter of just social loyalties, she doesn't want to get involved with stuff that she might accidentally incriminate herself in. But there's still the argument to be made that Popstep's involvement in all this stuff that happened in the convention was less as a vigilante and less as a have-a-go hero, and more as a hostage. She was strapped to the back of a crab robot. There's not a whole lot she could really have done in that situation. I mean, sure, he has a bit of a hunch that she might be involved with vigilante work, but nothing that we see in this episode at the very least suggests that there's something of a smoking gun that he can really drag her in to get questioned or anything. Like, if he really did have that, he would have brought her in by now, because let's face it, she's working like once a week at the local supermarket, so it's really not bloody hard to get hold of her. And in fact, you could also say that Crawler having a hand in saving her wasn't a smoking gun on him being a vigilante either. I know, yes, sure, there's still all the rumours about him being a vigilante, but let's be honest, he's a guy that goes around dressed in an All Might hoodie. Like, that's the most normal thing in the world for this particular time period in this particular world. It'd be like someone going around with a hoodie with Batman on it or Captain America or something along those lines. And this guy has a very common quirk, and he was trying to save a friend, so you could make the argument that sure, he probably shouldn't have used his quirk in the way that he did do, but he was just doing what a lot of people would have done anyway. You know, like, at worst, realistically, they should only get let off with a warning or some minor community service. Though I will admit that at this point in the video, it feels like I'm building some kind of Saul Goodman-esque defense for the characters, so we'll end up moving on. With that said, it wouldn't be hard for the police to really twist the evidence to get her into trouble. Well, I say twist the evidence, as it's less them twisting it and more presenting it for what it really is, because, you know, she and Crawler are vigilantes, and, you know, maybe the reason why it wouldn't be that hard to get her to confess is the reason why Mikato's so reluctant to let her get involved with being interviewed for all of this. But hey, I'm sure this will be the thrust of this particular volume anyway, so we'll see and see where it goes. A slight side point to all of this is that I do like the running gag that we get with the detective who, totally out of spite, uses a bath bomb that was supposed to be a gift to his sister, and he spends the rest of the day going around smelling of roses and everyone picking up on that. It's a very short, silly little joke, but it's a fun one when you got a bunch of people joking about his private life, once again playing into the public and private theme of this particular episode. And I will say I'm glad that they didn't go into the 2000s era gay panic joke that I was worried that they were going to get into here. It's just a bunch of people going, have you got a new girlfriend? Oh, this has to be a thing that you're using to play the field, mate, isn't it? Oh, let me know how it works. Oh, it must be some... The ladies must go mad for this. Why did you get it? You know, that's basically the thing they're going for it. And I think that's a weird, fun little angle. A different little angle that they've gone with all of this that I was really one not expecting. The more substantial and arguably interesting aspect of this episode, however, is the scene that we get with at the Recycle Hopper's shop, where we see the Giant Mantis Man that I think that we first saw back in the first volume, and how they're adjusting, or not as the case may be, to being horrifically mutated into a Giant Mantis Man. I mean, it is interesting to get an insight into the lives of the victims of these attacks and how they are, or not, dealing with what ended up coming next. It stops these characters from just being a series of cannon fodder that our heroes have to defeat to save the day, and it ends up reminding us of the hero side of the villains, whether they be willing villains or otherwise, and that's a concurrent theme that we have with the main series as a whole. And I do respect that, and I like the fact that they ended up doing it with that none of these characters are just treated as just being means to an end or just evil because they happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Of course, sure, in the grand scheme of these things, there's probably a few of these characters who were evil, but still, that's besides the point. And it does end up giving us this neat little insight into how this superhero society tries to deal with those who have stranger quirks and weird body types because of the quirks that they have. After this horrible series of events that the Mantis Man has gone through, he can't live in his old home because he's literally a giant mantis now and he can't fit through the door, and now he has to live in the storeroom of the shop that he works at, and that's a rather tragic side of it. I know they're still also trying to fit a little joke in there, which is I don't think it really works given the context of what we're seeing here, but whatever. And another element of insight that we get into this, it states that, or one of the characters states that, oh, the government has a support scheme for people with unusual bodies and that they can provide you with a place to live, which does help to build out this world and give an insight as to how just normal aspects of human life work for characters like this that have body types and quirks that make their figures less human or less practical for the world in which they live in, but it also has the rather dark implication that all the people who have less than human body types all cooped up together in the same district almost, whether they be giants or people that are shaped like giant mantises. The Mantis Man also, I think, also plays into this aspect, this theme of this episode of neither having a public or private life. Well, he literally doesn't have either of them at this point. As he says, he now lives in a society that aren't built for people who have quirks like his. Not even halfway, as he put it. I mean, let's be honest, our society isn't. All buildings, tools, items are built around very specific specifications. I forget what it is. I think that every piece of furniture, every tool, every such and such within our world is measured for the proportions of a average 5'9" able-bodied man. I think that's the statistic. because it's been a very, very long time since I learned about this. It's getting close to maybe, I'm not even going to think about it, since the late 2000s since I learned about that. But in any case, it does end up highlighting how something like that can affect a world like this when you have people with just these radically different quirks, I should say. And this does end up giving some greater credence to the heteromorphic stuff that we end up getting in the latter halves of the main series. All interesting, fascinating stuff, but with that said, let us get into the negatives. And I have to say is that whilst I do appreciate all this stuff that we get that is building up this world, whilst I can appreciate the fact that we're starting to pivot into what will probably be the thrust of this particular volume, I have to say is that I'm not 100% sure that I can appreciate All Might's involvement in the here and now. Yes, it's fine if he's just here for a series of cameos, but I feel that that's not going to be the case. I think that for this volume, at the very least, is going to be a fairly significant focus of the series events here, that is ultimately going to take a lot of screen time and a lot of oxygen, so to speak, away from Crawler, which is something that I'm not best keen about, because it really does feel as though Crawler as a character really is being pushed to one side here. We can talk about Midoriya feeling like a side character in his own life story within the main series, but in Vigilantes, with Crawler, it feels like a more extreme case there. Because at least with Midoriya, you can make the argument of, oh, well, he wasn't there for that scene, or he wasn't able to do something in that moment. With Crawler, there's often scenes where he could do something, and he should do something, but he just stood in the back not doing much of anything. And I feel that now that we have All Might coming to the persuasion, that he's not really going to do much of really anything, apart from a few gag bits here and there, and maybe a cool action sequence towards the end of the volume. I know that this criticism might feel like a case of where's Poochie, but still, we need our lead character to have time to be the lead character. At this point, he's feel like increasingly more like a side character all of this. And if we are going to commit to him being a side character, well, at least can we commit on to who actually is the main character, please? In any case, we now pivot into the overview, and I have to say that this is a decent episode for what it is. It does give us an insight into some aspects of this whole world that we haven't had said to us either within this series or the main series. I think that from a purely mechanical point of view, this episode works really well. The pacing is good, nothing feels out of place with all of it, and it has a greater charm to it. I just am a little bit nervous as to All Might's involvement with all of this will ultimately end up translating to us. Is he going to steal screen time away from Crawler? We'll soon see. With that said, however, let's get into Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner. We're back again, several days after the fact, because we're now on the usual production schedule of these episodes. We have a comment from the previous video from Big X1 that says, I read this volume months ago. After this one, the story does pick up and become more focused. Think of it as a light opening gag before things get more serious. Thank you for your comment, and yeah, I have read forward a little bit from here. I'm just trying to find a good way to put these all together so that I'm not spending so much of my free time making videos, because we are getting to the tail end of the year. I want to spend a little bit more time just, enjoying the moment as well as doing other things, because as frequent fans of this channel will know, we've got our Christmas videos coming up in a couple of months' time, or for next month, I should be saying a few weeks' time, which takes a lot of planning and takes a lot of work, so I've got to build up a nice bank of stuff for that. But anyway, that's a problem for me to figure out for later. Let me know what you thought about this particular episode of My Hero Academia Vigilantes. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know down below. Thank you all for watching, thank you all for listening, and see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!